So today I want to talk about the recent video that Survival Lilly made on Geiger counters and getting one now, and also some of the recent work that Canadian Prepper has done. Now we'll start with Survival Lilly. She seems pretty upset. The realization of what's going on and what's been going on has kind of fallen home, and she's reacting to that. Now, she's correct. You really need the book Nuclear War Survival Skills by Crescent Kearney. That is critical that you get that. That'll give you more information than any of these channels are giving you. Now, the interesting thing is the red copy is probably the earlier edition. The green cover one has a little bit more information in it. So when you're looking for a copy, get the green one. She stresses a Geiger counter and getting one, but she failed to point out in the book she showed you, Crescent Kearney shows you how to make a improvised nuclear war radiation detector. And what it uses is stuff around your house, and it uses a small can like you would buy vegetables in. The size of the can is critical because the internal volume of the can is what creates the electro chamber in the detection device. In the thread, make sure the thread is cotton. You don't want synthetic. So if you look at an online copy of that book and just download the information, screenshots, whatever you got to do, it shows you how to make a radiation meter from stuff you have at home. The next thing we want to talk about, I found it really interesting. She used the Chernobyl incident in the map of Austria to take a look at fallout. And that's interesting, but I like to make 2 points about it. One, it's valid if a nuclear power plant melts down. If you have a nuclear war, the information provided there is grossly inaccurate and not really useful. The reason for that is a meltdown at a nuclear power plant has a different distribution of radioisotopes than an atomic bomb does. So the decay schemes in the isotopes you have to protect for are different between a power plant meltdown and a nuclear war. Now, if you have them together, then it's kind of all bets are off. Now, the interesting thing is everybody talks about potassium iodide pills. That only protects you from radioactive iodine, which is a gas. Your more immediate problem is one of barrier shielding. The radioisotopes from a nuclear detonation, you're going to require barrier shielding. If you don't have barrier shielding, potassium iodide is not going to help you. Now, if you have a reactor meltdown and you have iodine gas, then the pills would help you. But they won't help you with the cesium-137 she referred to. Now, we're not going to talk about cobalt because that's kind of a different monster you'd have to deal with. That's a long-term radioactive material, and what you would want to do is evac that area after levels have gotten low enough that you can do that safely. She talked extensively about only madmen would use nuclear weapons. One of the issues of why they got rid of some of the tactical nuclear weapons is tactical nuclear artillery shells. People could fire those without the command and control in place. Some of the tactical bombs in the 50s and 60s, you could do the same thing. You could have them mounted on an aircraft, get in it and go. But the question comes down to if you were an infantry or artillery soldier and you saw 5,000 Russian or Chinese troops coming at you, would you fire a nuclear round? Is that a madman's response or not? The same thing, if you were a Russian soldier or a Chinese soldier and you saw 10,000 NATO troops coming, would you fire that nuclear round? So then we look at Canadian Prepper's recent work and also Full Spectrum Survivals. They've all come to the realization that nuclear war is probable. So that's something the world has been dealing with, but the public wasn't aware of for as long as I can remember. The closest we ever came to nuclear war was in the 1990s in the Fourth Indo-Pakistani War. The aircraft were 2 minutes from point of release for the cruise missiles. So we're in a similar situation now. And as we move forward, you have to keep in mind there are other things that go with nuclear weapons. They are chemical, bio, mass drivers, plasma weapons, and also fuel air explosives. So these are used based on target selection criteria. So keep in mind, if you're not in a target area, the likelihood of you receiving that is very low. What you would receive is fallout. So if you take a look at some of the past videos I did, there's some drawings in there that show you what happens to homes at different blast overpressure. That illustrates the point of why you don't want to be in the 5 to 1 psi overpressure range. You want to get away from those urban targets. Now, the other thing I would like to point out is all these channels we're discussing, not one of them has showed you any excerpts from nuclear war survival skills or any of the other government publications or studies that show you how to make improvised nuclear shelters, whether they're blast or fallout only. That is strangely lacking. Ask yourself why. Now, another thing I would like to discuss is the difference between a lot of the medical information you're seeing on nuclear war, radiation sickness, and radiation poisoning. These are different things. The first thing you need to understand is there is a peacetime radiation level or threshold for health, and there's a wartime threshold. The wartime thresholds are much higher. So almost all of the information you're seeing from medical sources is the peacetime radiological treatment procedures and so forth. When you're looking at this, you need to determine whether it's peacetime or wartime levels. The reason these two different levels exist is a degree of risk that you can take based on the urgency of the circumstances. So in a nuclear war, you may want to take much more additional risk in order to preserve life, to work outside your shelter, or do some decontamination that would lead to the viability of your group. So when we look at this, we need to know the differences. The second thing is all of the hysteria on end plate. And end plate was designed to heal damage to blood cells, which is one of the characteristics of radiation sickness or radiation poisoning. Now, the difference between radiation sickness and radiation poisoning is radiation poisoning is actual ingestion of the materials. If you ingest it, the effects are much more severe. That's why we want to prevent ingestion. Now, nuclear contamination leads to a lot of cell damage and body damage from the exterior. So radiation contamination, radiation poisoning, radiation sickness can be from different causes. And it's confusing when people look at this. Now, to take end plate a little further, once you reach the point where you're having cell breakage, breakdown, and degradation from either nuclear poisoning where it's ingestion or contamination where the rays are coming through your body but you didn't ingest them. Once your blood gets to the point where it's breaking down like that, for end plate to be a positive factor in your recovery, you're also going to have IV care and a lot of fluids and other drugs. This is something people don't talk about. If you're damaged to the point where you need a lot of end plate, you're going to need IV care. And what you're going to find is in a survival situation, IV fluid care is much more rare than end plate's going to be. So please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.